Hello and welcome back to the Thursday Night Football NFL DFS slate breakdown. We got the Jaguars at the Saints this week. Should be a close game. Game total is only 39.5, but at least the spread is a close one. So we're going to go over the entire game, but before we do, come join us at LionStar. $39.99 a month gets you access to everything we do, all the props, all the DFS. Get it all. One low price for all the sports we cover. So come join us. And also, if you're watching this, please give me a like, subscribe to our channel, comment below. Just help us help feed that YouTube algo to give us a little more reach and just keep giving away the content for free. Now, let's get into it. Let's get into this slate. It is an interesting one here. As I said, it is a close spread, and one of the things I want to start off with is just going over some of the injuries here. So Trevor Lawrence is questionable. Now, monitor this news. Obviously, I do expect him to play. He has practiced in limited fashion this week. Our expert, Dr. Chow, has said that he is likely to play, and he expects him to play. So, all intents and purposes, I expect him to play. Zay Jones is out again for the Jaguars as well, so it just helps Ridley, Kirk, Ingram, get a little bit more. Now, going over to the Saints side, Jamal Williams is questionable. There is a chance that he plays. He has practiced in limited fashion this week, and it's something to monitor because Kamara has had a giant workload, and maybe if Williams is back, that workload shrinks a little bit. Other interesting thing is Taysom Hill. We have at the tight end 1 right now. He played a lot in line at tight end this week, even played in the slot a little bit. And once again, Jawan Johnson is out. So those are a couple things to mention and talk about here. Now, let's get into the slate a little bit here. So we will go position by position a little bit, and let's get into it. Starting with quarterback, I think it is interesting to notice Derek Carr 38% owned on DraftKings, and Lawrence is only showing 7% on DraftKings. I don't get this ownership difference. In this case, I would be hammering Trevor Lawrence. I do think this changes, so I'm not going to harp on ownership too much, but it is an interesting matchup for both guys. And then on FanDuel, it is flipped where Lawrence is high owned and Derek Carr is lower owned. Now, what I will say is I think it is a good matchup for both quarterbacks. I think that both defenses are very good at stopping the run and allow some passing. In Derek Carr's situation, Minshew, Allen, Mahomes, Richardson all had some of their best yardage weeks versus the Jags. Stroud was right there. He had his third best yardage week. Mahomes actually had his second, but he had 305 yards against the Jags and 306 versus Denver last week. So even though it's technically a second, it's pretty much a tie. So then on the other side, the Saints really haven't played much as far as QB, but we have seen some mediocre QBs have some success. So I think Lawrence can have some real success, even with him probably losing some mobility due to his knee situation. I still think that they're going to be able to do enough that Lawrence will be able to get there. So he is absolutely interesting. Now, if we go to the running back spot, it is the ETN and the Kamara show. These guys have absolutely ran the game for both of their teams. They have been all of the work. Now, there is some questions with Kamara. If Jamal Williams comes back, maybe he eats into it. But both guys, similarly priced, similarly owned. It's really a toss-up of which one you want to go to. The one thing I will say, both of them are pretty high owned going against very good run defenses. So I don't love them, but there is still paths for them to get there. They can get there through the air or get there just because they get lucky and they get, a couple red zone attempts on the one and punch one in. So there are still paths to their success of even in a tough matchup, but I do think they're going a little high owned for how the matchup shakes out. Now, FanDuel wise, same situation, similarly priced, similar ownership, and their matchups, neither of the teams that these defenses have faced have been able to really do anything on the ground versus them. Bijan Robinson is the exception. He got to 21 versus Jacksonville, 14 for 105 and 5 receptions for 32. 5 for 32 does show you that, they can get beat through the air a little bit. So that is, how the Kamara is gonna beat them. And we know that he can. So on a site like DraftKings where it is point per reception, I do think Kamara or ETN are a little bit more enticing than, say, on FanDuel. But needless to say, they're in a tough matchup for the ground. Doesn't mean they can't get there. Just going to be a little bit harder. Now, wide receiver situation. I don't understand why Michael Thomas is the highest owned. He's around 68. But, it is what it is. He is priced fairly low for his involvement. And that's probably why we're getting here. I just don't love it. I just don't see a huge ceiling for him. If you want to throw him in as a flex play and it's a low scoring game, he gets 5 for, 50 yards. Maybe it gets there, but I just don't see a ton of ways that he is in the optimal lineup. So I do hesitate to go there a little bit. I think Ridley and Kirk are both in good situations. I do like Kirk a little bit more than Ridley, but you can make a case for either one of those guys. I think they're in a good situation. Rashid Shaheed, I do like him much more than Michael Thomas. He's the one that has all the upside. Now, his floor is way lower. He is also cheaper, but, I think you can take your chances there. I do think he is probably going a little over-owned. And with that, Chris Olave is going under-owned. I think there's no way that he should be this low-owned when he is possibly the best receiver in this game and in a good matchup, one where wide receiver ones have done really well. And then if you want to go to the cheap, punt plays, I think Agnew is likely the best play there. Ownership is going there also. Now it's 17% owned. I'm not likely to get there very much. Because it's a total punt play, I might try and figure out somewhere else to get lower ownership. But there is a chance that he is wide receiver 3 this week, and with Jones out. And sometimes they do call some short passing plays and use him as an extension of the run game, which they may need to do this week due to the fact that the run D is very good. Ownership-wise on FanDuel, Kirk higher owned than Thomas, and then Olave and Ridley, but all 4 of those guys very, very similarly owned. Shaheed is only 20% and pretty interesting there. And then you get to the total punt plays and Agnew, Jones, Kirkwood. Your guess is as good as mine in those. Agnew does have the most likely path to being that guy. But when you get to, those type of punt plays, you never know. Just one broken play can make or break it. And matchup-wise, we do have Rashid Shaheed being the best matchup on this slate. 32nd place Jaguars matchup. So it is a good one for him. I do think it's interesting there. Michael Thomas is right there also. And then, like I said, Kirk, I like Kirk, sorry about that, a little bit better than I do like Ridley, but I think both have their chance to do very well. I just think Ridley may be covered by Lattimore a bit more, and Kirk, when he goes inside, he won't be on him quite as much. Like I said, wide receiver ones have done very, very well versus Jacksonville. Pittman's crushed him twice. Diggs did really well. London caught a touchdown, was able to get 7 targets, just couldn't get much going, but still a touchdown there. Then Nico Collins and MVS got blanked pretty much, but I wouldn't hold that much, too against them. The better wide receiver ones have done well versus this team, so I absolutely like Olave there. Now, tight end wise. All right, so we got Ingram, who I think he's in a very good spot. He obviously projects as the highest projection for a tight end, but I think Taysom Hill is very, very interesting, and especially if he's coming in at only 10%. And let me give you a little bit of reasons why. One, we saw last season when he got used, he did have some very big weeks. I'll remember that 9 carry, 112 yard game with 3 touchdowns, but he also had a lot of other games that were interesting. They like to use him around the red zone. He has, an ability to get in the red zone from a bunch of different ways. So I think he is interesting. And last week, they used him a ton. He was on the field a lot, the most he's been all season. He had 8 targets. He was playing in line at tight end and a little bit in the slot. If they go back to that, I think he needs to be in your lineup at the ownership that he's at. Now, this ownership may change, but I think he is a very interesting play, and it's going to be really hard to project him this week. His projection is going to be fragile because wherever you put him, if you have him playing 70%, well, then there's big time questions. Well, is he really going to be there? If you only have him playing, say, 30% like he usually does, well, we just saw, him play a ton. Doesn't he just go back there? So I think his projection is very fragile this week. So that's a situation where ownership-wise, I really lean into ownership. If the field is loving him and his ownership shoots way up, then maybe I'll be a little bit off because I know that projection might be a little fragile. And I think this is a situation where you need to kind of have that idea in your head and play accordingly. Foster Marneau also was involved. He's been involved in a couple weeks in a row. I think he is an interesting, lower owned play as well. He just needs a touchdown, and that would get him there. Brenton Strange for Jacksonville did get in the end zone last week. He, got 3 targets, but outside of that last week, he hasn't really got a target there. Don't love going there. However, we got a low scoring game here, so any touchdown is likely to make you an optimal, and with how cheap he is, you may want to consider him. FanDuel ownership wise, very similar. Ingram isn't quite as high owned, but I do really like Ingram in this matchup and would consider him. Taysom Hill, I've already given you my 2 cents there, as well as Foster Marneau. And matchup wise, Saints been a decent matchup for tight ends. 4 for 61 on a tutty for Schultz. Patriots, hard to really think too much about that. Otten got in the end zone, 49 yards for Musgrave. They've been doing okay versus the Saints team. So I think Ingram being, pretty good pass catcher and pretty athletic. I think he fits the mold that could do well against the Saints team. Jacksonville has been better versus tight end. The one thing I will say here is they haven't faced a ton. 67 yards for Grayson is very good for him. You can't hold much against Knox when they have so many different pass catchers, and they have a couple tight ends they use there. Pitts, same thing, couple tight ends, and Falcons just struggle to actually throw the ball. Schultz wasn't being involved as a tight end much this early in the season. This Kelsey was coming off an injury. There's a lot of different paths here where I don't take too much into consideration as far as who the Jacksonville Jaguars have faced on tight end. So with that, I wouldn't lean too much into their matchup being so low. I would lean more into trying to figure out what they're going to do with Taysom Hill, if he's going to play a lot or not. If he does, it's probably a pretty good play. Then we got defense. We got Jaguars. We got Saints. Both are obviously in play. The Jaguars have been a pretty solid D. However, they haven't played, many teams, really. So they did play KC, though. Kept them low scoring. Played Buffalo. Kept them relatively low scoring. So I think Jags do have some outs as far as being a decent defense. Saints. Now, this is the team that really hasn't played anybody. Tennessee, Carolina, Green Bay, Tampa Bay, New England, and Houston. They have been decent, just not elite, and none of those offenses really scare me. So I think that the Jaguars D, you could probably believe in a little bit more than the Saints one. But the Saints can get after the quarterback a little bit. They can rack up some sacks. And if Lawrence can't move very well, maybe that leads to him being able to get a couple more. Both kickers are in play. On these low-scoring games, if they get, if one of them gets 3 field goals, he's likely going to be optimal. So you do need to consider them. And as far as the ownerships on FanDuel, defense is pretty low, kickers pretty low. I think you can consider all of them. All in all, I think this game is an interesting one to dissect. It is going to likely be kind of hard to get different. That's why we may really have to lean into like the Taysom Hill play. If Olave really is lower owned, we're gonna have to play him and get off some of those running backs. May just have to have some different weird kind of lineups this week in order to get different and not dupe 300-400 times, whatever. So anyways, guys, try to get different on this slate. Enjoy the game, and I'll be back pretty soon for the Sunday main slate DFS breakdown. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Helps us a ton. Thank you guys for joining me. Good luck. And I'll be back soon. Bye.